Roger Taylor. The second hour will meet guitarist Brian May and bassist John Deacon. This interview was recorded on a portable tape recorder at Queen's Hotel in Beverly Hills on their last tour, the tour where they played Long Beach Arena a couple of times and a gigantic pre-Christmas party at the Forum. 94.7, Queen. And now, via tape recorder, we go to the elegant La Hermitage Hotel in Beverly Hills. Queen, Roger Taylor, has the tenor voice. Freddie's voice is a bit deeper. I have to ask you a question first, Freddie. Who is Larry Lyrics?
He's dead and gone, actually, to be honest. It's a little project that, a long time back, I think it was just after the first album, that a producer called Robin Cable actually asked me to sort of do a sort of session, really, and sing on one of his sort of productions. It was a Beach Boys number, right?
No, it's Phil Spector.
Phil Spector, yeah.
I can hear music.
I can hear music, yeah. And all he wanted me to do was to sing on it. And then Roger played drums, and finally Brian played guitar on it. So the three of us were on that. But I think he just used us as session people. In the end, he wanted a kind of a title, and I said, why not Larry Lyrics? Those are the days of Gary Glitter and people like that. So it was just a one-off thing.
Had the band actually been formed at that time?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we made our first album, I think, hadn't we?
Yes, it was after that.
The line on the back of the first album, and nobody played synthesizer. And that's still the case with Queen, isn't it?
It is, actually, yes. There seems to be a misconception about this latest album. Because we didn't put the no synthesizers thing on the back. But there are synthesizers. In fact, there aren't any. It's just something we don't use.
This album seems to have, well, like all the other Queen albums you're developing with the release of each record, this one seems to be a giant step forward into somewhat of a new direction with the basic Queen roots still there. Was this a planned move or something that slowly evolved?
It was kind of planned, I suppose. I think it was the only direction we could take, I think, because personally I think we were all quite... we'd had enough of the multi-tracking and the overproduction, or the sort of real heavy production. I think we wanted to go a bit easy on the next one, because we'd done it to death on Day of the Races and A Night at the Opera.
Right.
I think we wanted to ease off a little. Besides, I think our songwriting is really coming into its own. I mean, it's getting better. And we just felt that we needed a different kind of approach and discipline in the studio.
How is the new material working out on stage?
Well, it works out easier, really, than the stuff before, because it is perhaps less complex in sound layering. It's easier to reproduce on stage. In fact, we can do virtually any song, I think, of the new album on stage pretty accurately. We had a sort of set, but depending on how we're feeling, how we feel that the audience will react, we change it a little. In fact, we change it from day to day. Usually we know roughly what we're going to do when we go on which songs.
But now it's kind of whittled down to about sort of 3 sets. Like we have a real long set, something like 2.5 hours, to about another one to 2 1/4, another one is 2 hours, depending on how my voice is gonna feel on the night. And because this tour has been pretty hard, and my voice has been sort of it's been strained quite heavily. And there was a period where I virtually lost it. I mean, I came up with laryngitis, and so I had to be very careful.
I have heard through the trades that Bohemian Rhapsody is the most expensive single song ever produced. Is this true?
Great.
And about how much time and money went into producing that song?
A mind-boggling piece of information. I don't know.
You haven't heard this before, then?
Well, no, but people often come up with facts about our records that we haven't sort of really thought about. I mean, that was really only part of an album.
Yes, it was very hard to sing that on its own, because it was an album commitment, really. And how long did it take? It's very difficult to say. The actual operatic section in the middle took about a week.
4 days, yeah.
Took about a week.
4 days just on that bit, yeah.
Actually, you used the tapes in your concert performance.
Yeah, we make no sort of bones about that, because, I mean, there is no way, I can't believe anybody, any sort of quartet, any 4-piece, to recreate something like that. It would be stupid, I mean, to even try.
It would be rather sound weak, you know.
Yeah.
It has to sound weak.
It just wouldn't match up to it anyway. So rather than, before we used to just leave it out, but now I think we weren't sort of taken away from the act at all. by sort of having a tape of it, because I mean we make no bones about it. I mean the lights go out and you can really tell it's a tape.
I'm Bob Coburn. I hope you're enjoying our exclusive KMET interview with all four members of Queen. The first half with Freddie Mercury and Roger Taylor. I think I saw more electronic equipment at your last concert at the Forum than I've seen for any band in recent months, for sure. How much of this is employed in the Queen concert shows? Say when Brian is taking his guitar solo and there's the Echoplex and whatnot. How much is Brian, how much is engineer?
In fact, Brian does virtually all his tape loops things, you know, those where he builds out harmonies with the tape delay. By himself, he has his on stage. But
he actually does that while he's doing it.
Yeah, he has them on stage,
Yeah, I think you have to, because I mean you've got to be in control of your own repeats as well. I mean when I'm doing, I think Brian more so than me, because mine are kind of set, and I've got to work to that set pattern of my repeats, and I use harmonizer as well. But with Brian, he can change it on stage. So I mean, if he wants the repeats to be faster or slower, he can just go back to it and shift it.
That's remarkable.
So he's in total control, which I think it has to be from a guitarist point of view, because...
and he changes from song to song, you know, if he's using it in one song to like build up a rhythm, and he wants a lead layer on top, he'd change it. I mean, obviously it's preset, we have to know the tempo of the song. But he just changes it before the song.
But when you break it down, it's pretty simple, really. It's only a series of repeats. It's how you use them that really matters.
I mean, some of that, I would say our mixing board is fairly, I mean, I wouldn't say it's that much more complex than most. I wouldn't say it's more complex than the Floyd or anybody like that.
It just seemed there was so much more equipment there than I was used to seeing at rock concerts. The music, of course, is there. There's no question about that. One of the other things that sets you apart, I believe, is the incredibly tight stage show that you're capable of. I remember the last time seeing Freddie gallivant across the stage, move back to center stage, suddenly drop a left hand, and from behind a speaker out pops the guy with a tambourine. I couldn't believe it. Who does the timing and things like that?
It's called shouting at the roadies so they don't get it right.
It's just a matter of discipline, really. I think we incorporate a lot of that kind of thing. And it's experience. It's a lot of ingredients, isn't it?
Yeah, a lot of things.
And having a very professional crew to work with as well. And they've been with us for a long while. And there's certain things which I do, they just fall into place. Because I do that quite often now. It's become like a trademark. I put my hand out and the right thing happens. Well, what can I say? I mean, I go out there and do my stuff. I don't take any criticism, but yes. I basically go out there and have a good time. And I'm not afraid to sort of have a good time. So, I mean, you know, whatever happens.
Did you have a couple of solo albums before Queen was formed?
Solo albums?
Yeah. No?
No.
For some reason, I've carried around in the back of my mind this image that there were a couple.
Never for a solo album, but I mean, I haven't heard any of those. Brian probably has, yeah.
Actually, we ordered some, I think. There's about 12 or 13 now, I think. Different bootleg albums, mainly done at concerts all around the world.
A band functions in a certain way, and that's the reality of it. When the band is written up in different press articles and different media exposures, and unusual things are said. One thing that I read in Rolling Stone magazine, I believe, is that the people in Queen really don't know each other. That expressly what it said.
I don't know how they know that, because they don't know us.
Freddie and Brian have been in the band for X years, and Brian was quoted as saying, "I don't know who Freddie is." Is that the truth, or is that just blown out of proportion somehow?
Well, it depends how you sort of categorize that, really. I suppose what Brian was in a way trying to say is that there's a lot more that we still have to find out about each other. And I suppose that can be true, because, I mean, there's... you can never say you know enough about somebody, and I think as far as say Queen, I mean I think we've got so much more to offer, and we're still finding out about lots of things that we can do together.
What do you foresee for Queen? Obviously you haven't peaked as a band yet, but that's still to come, and could be 2 years, could be 10, could be a continually growing thing. Do you have any long-term plans for the band? Do you see any place that it might be taking you to?
Very hard to say, isn't it? You know,
we never, I don't think we've ever had an actual long-term plan, as you call it. This is what keeps us going. I think we just we just take it step by step. And I think every album we do is like a phase that we go through. And I mean, if we would sat here last year during the day of the races and said, what is your next album going to be like? We couldn't have told you.
No.
Well, then we kind of went back and we decided, depending on how we sort of feel at the time.
In fact, we only decided to do the album in like a couple of weeks before we actually went in and did it. It was like album or tour or something.
Yes, and it was a very quick decision, and I think it kind of worked at the time. And
more spontaneous.
Yes, a lot of those kind of decisions are spontaneous, and we just got, okay, we're going to do it right now. So I mean, God knows what's going to happen.
You don't have any contractual problems with creativity and what you can do or can't do?
No.
Really.
We're not bound in any creative way at all, by any contract. I mean, nobody tells us what to do. I mean, nobody sort of says, you're going on tour, you're going to make an album. I mean, we decide completely ourselves.
You're an album band. Do you ever plan recording singles, or do you take what you have off the album and use that?
It's basically that. I think I wouldn't like to be called just an album band. I think we're basically album and singles. But I mean, it's just that we don't actually set out to write singles. They do come up as an album track. Because basically what we feel is we just write good songs, and we just have a collection of songs that go on the album. And to be honest, any one of those could be a single. It just depends on the four of us coming, picking to an agreement, yes, picking the right one. So I mean,
you do get to pick them.
Oh, we get to pick. I mean, between the four of us, it takes us days to pick a single anyway, because nobody else gets a try.
Bohemian Rhapsody was a tough one, because people just couldn't agree.
It's a gutsy move to release an almost 6-minute long single.
Well, yeah, and the pressures from the record company, etc., in England to cut it down to 3 minutes. Can you imagine doing it? I mean, I can't imagine.
Are you living in England still?
Yes, we are at the moment. We are actually thinking about...
Roger's just bought a country mansion, which he's going to go back to.
Just in time to move out. It's very hard over there with the tax money. It's pretty crippling, Whereas if we were over here, we'd all really be very well off.
LA is very tempting, I must say. I've been looking, and it's just a matter of time. I mean, we definitely are going to go back and have a very large meeting. I think it's time to kind of cool off for a while, because we've been really working solidly for like the last 4 years, non-stop. And we've been saying to each other every time that we should ease off now. But then there's always been the next album and the next album. But I think this time, we're really going to go back. After 6 albums, I think you got to kind of say, okay.
It's got to the point where we work so hard, you just haven't got time to sort of go out and buy the things that you're working hard. Well, we don't just work hard to buy houses and cars and things, but work mainly because you enjoy it. But it's just nice to have some time to enjoy it.
True, because otherwise you're too far removed from base.
What other interests are there for you, Roger, besides the band and the time that you have on your own? What do you do to relax?
Well, I don't get much time. What do I do? I like the sun, but I don't really get much time to go. I went to France for a few days in the summer, but I got down to drove 1,200 miles to where I was going, and I had a telegram in the middle of nowhere saying, "Come back to London, you've got a TV show to do." So I mean, we really don't get much time to relax.
We're always doing something or other. There are always different little projects. At this very moment in time, we're doing a sort of documentary. On Queen, which kind of took a while. It's been going for months, and we've got to sort of go back and tie it together.
Yeah, it's quite a big project, really. Because it's using every bit of film that we have, because we bought all the film of us that we could.
We've never had a sort of
promotional things.
Never had a sort of a documentary on us ever, from like stage 1 to now. So I think it's going to be nice, and we've got to make sure it's going to turn out.
It won't be too long and tedious, hopefully.
Would there be a soundtrack with live recordings?
Oh yeah, I think there'll be shots of concerts, behind scenes, old promotional stuff, new promotional stuff, interviews, just all very cut about. I know we're not going to make it too long, but it will be a complete sort of synopsis of the band, I think.
And a good history of Queen.
Is going into the studio and getting an album down to where it's accessible on vinyl a major project for Queen? Does it take a lot of time?
It's very draining. Each album, I mean, everybody says, right, that's it, and, you know, never want to see the studio again.
It's time to pay for 2 weeks.
Yeah. A lot of people probably thought that we couldn't come up with an album, a short album, but I think we did it with this time, because, I mean, it took us relatively shorter.
It took us less than half our normal time, you know.
Usually we take something like 4 months, 3.5 to 4 months. And so it just goes to show that if we put our mind to it, we can do a very quick album.
Do you work best under pressure? And I mean by that, not having everything together when you go in the studio, but things come together when you're in that pressure situation of actually recording.
Yeah, I think we seem to. I mean, almost everything we do is under some sort of pressure.
So we have a so-called routine period, but a lot of it comes together in the studio. I think a song like We Will Rock You was one of the most spontaneous, actually, things, because Brian just came up with an idea and he said, look, I've got this kind of beat and I want to put a vocal line over it, and we literally just sort of got it together in the studio. And I mean, if you listen to it, I mean, it's pretty basic.
It's incredible.
And things like that, I mean, you just can't work on it for days, because, I mean, they just wouldn't work out right.
And now on KMET Los Angeles, let's meet Brian May and John Deacon. Brian has the lower voice and tends to talk a little softer. What led to that, Brian? That sounded almost like it was an exercise in the beginning and developed into something else.
In the beginning, it was just something which I thought would be pure audience participation. That's the way I thought of it. And it was almost an afterthought for the album, because I wasn't sure that it would work on a disc as opposed to live. But if you're going to do it live, then you have to tell people what it's all about. So we thought it'd be nice to put it on the disc somehow. And we just did it on one of the last days of the recording. We just did it in a day. We stomped on boards and clapped for the backing track, and then we all sang just the bits and pieces, and the guitar bit was on the end, which may lead to other things in the future, I don't know. But
funny how it worked out, because it's probably the most requested song on the album.
It's strange. I think it's an unusual sound to hear on the radio. It's unusual. There's a lot of gaps in it. It's unusual radio programming.
With as many years as the band has been performing and working together now, you have quite a backlog of material, most of it good. How do you decide what songs to do on stage?
Argument and elimination, really.
Yeah.
Certain things which just don't work that we've tried.
True, we tried some tracks off the albums, which we can't do, and some we try, which seem to, really work on stage. It's very difficult to tell. I mean, after we finished the album, we've, like the last one, most of those songs were, for the first time we did them was actually in the studio when we recorded them. So after we finished the album, we then, in rehearsals, try the songs out and see which ones sort of, would work, to go with a live show, and also with different songs that, perhaps, either Brian or Freddie has different visual ideas to go with them as well, especially with, like sort of opening the show or closing, and then they sort of, move into those positions, and then we perhaps jumble some of the others around, and change a few others.
In a way, it's very obvious a lot of the time. Things just cry out to be done in certain ways. And,
the medley of The Laugh of the Gods and Killer Queen on the last tour, I thought, was especially nice, because you cover a lot of the favorites and a lot of the hits.
Yeah, that's usual, and mostly they're songs which aren't that easy to do on stage, so it's nice to have them in a medley. We still have a medley, although it's different. It has different stuff in it this time. It's some of the same, and it's a bit longer. And the show's a bit longer. In fact, a lot longer. It's been anything from 2 hours, 10 minutes to 2.5 hours.
Yeah, around that length, yeah.
It's quite a strain on the scene. I think most bands find that if they get into doing longer shows most nights of the week, then the throat just doesn't stand up to it. In fact, we all suffer a bit, but obviously the load on Freddie is that much greater.
94.7 KMET, an exclusive interview with Queen. John, I see that your hand has been wrapped in a bandage. What has happened, and will it affect your playing?
I hope it won't affect my playing. What I did, the very silly thing to do, I stuck my hand through the glass partition in the shower. So it was a large cut in the hand and a cut on the arm, which I had to have stitched up, so I've got a few stitches in there. But I can still move my fingers, and as long as it doesn't hurt too much, I should be able to play okay.
No tendon damage or anything like that?
No, it wasn't, lucky actually. If it's been a bit on one side or the other, it could have gone through a nerve or something, but it's lucky. It's cuts, but basically, on the surface, so nothing too deep.
Brian, is it different for you when you play Los Angeles or New York?
Yeah. Interesting question. There are a lot of parallels, I think, because the Forum and Madison Square Garden are, I would say, kind of parallel gigs in the USA. Particularly for English bands, they're the two sort of dream places that you want to play and conquer, you know. I'd say they're kind of similar. When in the early days, before we could play the Forum, we used to go and see other groups, and we felt that it was a slightly more relaxed atmosphere in the Forum than in Madison Square Garden. But we find for our shows that the energy level is about the same. We find it very, very electric in a way. I think it's always been a good place for us to play, and we have our own audience in the Forum, which feels great.
The last time I saw you, Thin Lizzy opened. You played at the Forum.
Yep.
You did an amazing guitar solo with, I believe, tape delay, perhaps Echoplex.
Yeah.
How much of that is you? How much is engineering when you do that on stage?
Well, the theory of it is that it's something that I always wanted to do from very young, to work at basically an echo system, but instead of using it as an effect, to actually play things with it. So what actually happens is I play a phrase and it's delayed by a certain amount and then it comes back out. And I can play a harmony line with it. And I have a second delay, so I can do up 3-part harmonies, and there's lots of other things you can do. And there's no engineering involved except for setting up the delays in the first place. So once you have your delays, there's a certain fixed interval. Mine are about 2 seconds each, something like that. And then it's all up to the player, because if you obviously have to get in sync, you have to know what you're doing. And if you make a mistake, it comes back 3 times instead of once. But it can be fun. It's the kind of thing which can work one night, and then another night you don't feel quite the same. It doesn't work the same. So it's a variable thing. But to me, it's a legitimate device because it's something which you can actually play, and you can plan things out to work the harmonies, or you can do counterpoint, or you can do purely rhythmic things. There's no end to what you can do with it. And I think it's a legitimate extension of guitar playing.
94.7 KMET Los Angeles will return with Bob Coburn and his guest Queen in just a moment.
LP number 12 is here at... But this time...
I can't hear well. Especially in the large places, it's... as with most things, the monitors are so critical. If you can't hear what's going on properly, then you get in a real mess, particularly with this thing. And it all gets out of sync, and it's not too good. So I make sure that I can stand in the right place to hear what's going on.
John, you seem to write some very touching songs, some very feeling songs about emotions and whatnot. What is your impetus for that? Are those based on real situations or just your projections?
Sort of, yeah. I mean, my songwriting's only just sort of started within the last 2 or 3 years, you know. Yes, basically sort of personal experiences and, you know, ideas, you know, one has, you know.
Spread Your Wings is your song.
Yeah, that's right, yeah, it's one of the new album, yeah.
An incredible piece of music. I love it.
I mean, on this album, we actually have, it's the most shared the writing's ever been, really, isn't it?
Yes.
So, well, it seems to be, yes, that's right.
Yeah, but no, that's a good...
Well, we'll see, really, at the end of the day, you know, how well it does, you know.
I think it's a very good thing. The new album is much more a group album than we've had for some time. It's very... As John says, it's kind of equal participation.
Well, Roger and I got 2 songs on it this time. For the first time.
What do you find most disturbing about the rock and roll syndrome, making the album, going on the road, living in the hotels?
The most disturbing?
It's a toss-up.
I think the hardest part is the beginning, when you don't know what to expect. I think the hardest tours for us, in some ways, were the beginning, certainly for me, because it physically just defeated me on the first tour. I got hepatitis. I think really just due to strain, physical and emotional strain, because an American tour for an English band is something very different from anything you've ever experienced. Well, when we get to this stage, we've done a lot of it, and we know what to expect, we know how to pace ourselves. And it's really not that bad a life. It can be lonely, and you can get homesick and all that stuff, but it's a way of life which you can definitely get into.
So much distance between American cities. I think the travel time has increased.
Yes, it does take quite a while, but I mean, you know, we've got to the position now where we can sort of, you know, everything's sort of very well organised, so it's, you know, sort of any inconvenience is really sort of kept, you know, to a minimum, so it's not too much of a strain on us, you know. I mean, if that's all kept down, and all we have to do is think about the show, then that's really, you know, the best way to do it.
94.7 KMET. This band has gone from opening act to Martha Hoovel, I believe, a few years ago,
Yeah,
to
my first tour over here, yeah.
not only headliners, but selling out multiple shows in larger cities. Did you have any idea that the band could be this big? I'm sure you thought you could make it or do something, but is it a bit of a surprise?
I don't know, it's very hard to answer that. What would you say?
I don't know, surprise to me in a way. I mean, because it's grown steadily over the past 5 years, so it hasn't suddenly come in one jump. You know, it's been a sort of a, you know, a good gain each time we come over here. But I'm sure Roger saw himself playing Madison Square Garden and the LA Forum, yeah. It's one of his ambitions, I think, to play those two particular venues.
I think every band starts off with a certain belief in itself, or it wouldn't be doing the thing anyway. We had a lot of belief in ourselves as a band when we started off. We thought we had a lot to offer. But I don't think we even knew how far it was possible to get. I don't think we realised what touring in America meant. Because really America is the centre of the rock and roll world, I would say. I think if we'd known what was involved in building up a following over here and doing the thing properly, we would have thought twice about even trying. Because it really is a long road.
So what is the compelling force? The music itself?
Yes, I think it's a mixture of things. You have to have ambition to reach more and more people. I think that's part of it. It's almost an artificial goal, but it does help to spur you along, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
Also, the music is the prime thing that you want to be doing, otherwise you wouldn't do it, I guess. Because there are easier ways. And if you want to be rich, there are easier ways. There is a kind of blind force of ambition which runs through rock and roll, which I don't think anyone could define. Just the will to get out there and do it bigger and better than you ever did it before.
The image that we get as listeners and appreciators of the music is that Queen is, first of all, a classy band. There's a certain elegance that Queen exudes. Secondly, there's an intellectual quality with the lyrics, the type of harmonies that you do. And then there's Brian on one side of the stage wailing on electric guitar that to me is the anchor, the balance, and kind of the earth of the band. Who's influenced you in your guitar playing, Brian? I hear a little Jimmy Page, a little Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, there's probably that and a lot more. Certainly Jimi Hendrix, a lot. Jeff Beck, I used to listen to a lot. I still listen to people. I still get a lot out of listening to people. On the last tour, I saw a band called Lightning down in the south somewhere in Texas. And there was a guitarist in there who I know I got a lot off. I've never seen him since, but there was something when we got in the studio next time that I remembered that, and I was thinking of that when we were doing the album. I think it's a good thing. I'm not ashamed to say that I have influences, because I know I do. I think it's a good thing to have them and recognise them and to build on the things that you learn from other people, because I think that's the way things progress. The songs generally come out, I don't know where the songs come from.
I mean, Fred has one or two, like, influences of various sides of music, which are very obscure, but when he sort of borrows those things, they come out very different, you know, and very individual, because it's sort of his sort of adaptation of, you know, certain forms of music, you know.
It's nice to work for a long time on things very often, I think, and they mature in your mind. So if you get an idea and perhaps you put it on tape or you write it down and then put it away for a few months and then come back to it and you then see it in a different light. I think that's how you progress a long way in certain directions. Also, by using the group to its full, you can achieve a lot of things. If you have an idea and then you then give it to the rest of the band and it gets chewed over in that way, then more tends to come out than if you work on it yourself. And that's something we're still learning. I think this album was much more a group effort than perhaps the previous two. Although the previous two are probably the highest level of complexity and actual musical endeavour, I would say. The new one is a group album and was done in that spirit.
But how long did it take to record A Night at the Opera?
Months.
4.5.
Yeah. I think that was That was possibly the longest one.
The races was long too.
Yeah, they were both long, yeah. Those two were the longest ones, yeah.
Wow, that's a long time.
And that was not playing about. That was, I would say, a minimum of 12 hours a day.
Yeah, every day
for that period. Sometimes a lot more. Sometimes working all through the night. And not throwing things away either. It's all on those albums. They're very complex albums.
Sometimes a couple of songs get pieced together and become one.
Sometimes bits and pieces do get put together, but for a particular reason. Usually it's very obvious why. But we don't collaborate. We don't write together. We never have done that. Except, well, with the possible exception of things like Stone Cold Crazy, which were things which we did write from the early days, and we're not quite sure who actually did write them. It just sort of happened.
I asked Freddie something, Brian, and I'm going to ask you the same thing. If you want, I'll give you his response first. Here is the question.
I don't want to know.
Okay. The Rolling Stone interview. There was a quote saying that you and Freddie had been in the band for 4 or 5 years, and you still didn't know who he was.
Oh, yeah, I think I said that to that guy. I said a lot of other things which he didn't print, which were much more worthwhile.
Is that out of context? Is that a feeling in Queen, or...?
I think it is a little out of context, yeah, because in a way you can be with people a long time and you never really know them. But I think it's out of context because I thought it was possibly a good thing. I think it's a good thing that we still have a bit of mystique for each other, and we don't know each other's responses so well that we can do without each other. You know what I mean? There's still a lot of argument and interest in the band, and nothing's taken for granted. So if one of us writes a song and then brings it to the group, you never know what the response is going to be. That's in a musical level. And on a personal level as well, we respect each other's privacy. We know the need to get away from each other every now and again.
Because we're with each other so much anyway, you know. I mean, when we, you know, as you say, talking about doing an album that takes that long, and then working and touring, you know. I mean, most of the time we sort of, you know, living together and working together, you know, so it's nice to, you know, one has to have little breaks from each other as well, and also, you know, retain a bit of one's personal life, you know, as well.
How is your international success beyond England and the United States? Do you have a market in Australia and Japan?
Australia, Japan, a lot of Europe as well. I mean, we also sell, well, basically we sell records everywhere, you know, but it's, you know, those territories I just mentioned, you know.
Japan especially is a huge thing for us.
There's obviously that pull for you to go and play there as well, you know. I mean, like, we could easily go now and do a tour of Japan, Australia, and go around Europe again, you know, and and then we can start off again, you know.
That's the thing, it's hard to stop.
It is hard to stop, but we're going to have to. I'm Bob Coburn from 94.7 KMET Los Angeles. I'd like to thank all 4 men.